Hello everyone, welcome back to Yu-Gi-Oh! My name is Greg and I'm the Yu-Gi-Oh! Fan.
And my name is Joshua. I'm the Yugi newbie.
This is just a podcast where we talk about each episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! 4Kids Dub in particular, and today we're talking about episode 10, Give Up the Ghost. Josh, what's going on in the episode?
So after a pretty standard 3 minutes of intro and recap, we finally get to where we are in the episode, which is where Yugi's fighting Seto Kaiba, or the Ghost Kaiba as we like to call him, and we're in the middle of the duel. It's very exciting. So Yugi's kind of like in a bad position here because he has 3 magical hats and one of them is hiding his Dark Magician, and then Seto Kaiba has one of his Blue Eyes White Dragons out. So if the Blue Eyes White Dragon hits the right hat, basically, then Yugi dies.
And the basic breakdown of this episode, for those who haven't seen it, it's just a duel between Yugi and this Ghost Kaiba. They throw back and forth, some cards get thrown out, some blue eyes get obliterated. Eventually, the Ghost Kaiba is revealed to be a not literally Kaiba, even though I guess we kind of understood that, but the Ghost Kaiba eventually explodes into revealing himself to be some kind of clown character, and he still claims that he is Seto Kaiba's evil side, brought back from the Shadow Realm by Pegasus. So Josh is going to have to explain to us what's going on, because I've been watching the show for 15 years and I still don't know what's going on.
I mean, I can do my best. So we're not quite there yet with the Ghost Kaiba reveal. So yeah, there's 3 hats and one of them's hiding the Dark Magician, and then Yugi also spices things up finally, which I appreciate. There's a lot more use of trap cards in this episode because trap cards always feel like the way you normally want to play this game. Like I feel like in the past in a lot of duels, it's kind of just been like, oh, who plays the stronger monsters? Or like a lot of things typically to do with the environment. But this duel, there's like nothing specific with the environment. And as Seto Kaiba's deck is very kind of like brute force, like just has really good monsters, it's kind of interesting to see this dynamic where like really good monsters, and he does have some trap cards. Seto Kaiba plays it, or Ghost Kaiba, but Yugi kind of relies a lot more on these trap cards to do things, which is very effective as we see, or just more magic cards, I guess, which is kind of interesting to see that dynamic. So essentially, yeah, the Blue Eyes White Dragon, it attacks the wrong hat, which activates a trap card that I believe makes the Blue Eyes White Dragon immobile. Am I wrong about that?
So I thought this whole thing was kind of inconsistent with Spellbinding Circle from what we see later in the show. So I kind of want to talk about that stuff for a little bit.
Hmm.
Where it's
Okay.
like, first of all, the animation for the Spellbinding Circle getting activated was really bizarre to me because it almost felt like there was no animation. It was just like this blue cloud kind of, not even cloud, just like this blue aura kind of appeared around the blue eyes after the ghost kind of hits the hat with the Spellbinding Circle under it. So like the card is like literally what looks like this Spellbinding Circle. I know that's not like a literal thing, but you know what I mean? Like a
Yeah,
magic
summoning
circle,
circle or something.
a summoning circle, yeah. And then so later on in the show, it'll just be that kind of graphic attaching itself around a monster and then weakening it. So it's like a very
Mhm.
clear visualization of what's going on. Here it was just like this weird, almost nothing image of just the light around the Blue Eyes Red Dragon just kind of became blue. And that was supposed to signify that the spellbinding circle was active or something like that. So I found that kind of funny.
Yeah, so now I believe we cut to Seto, the real Seto Kaiba, because he's still hacking Pegasus at this point. So I believe in the whole last episode, like there was this whole thing of him just trying to get access to the duel, and that's kind of where we left things off. But now he actually does things in that he has access to the field, and he sees that Yugi's in a really bad spot because Ghost Kaiba has the blue eyes, and he's in a really bad position. So he interestingly actually hacks the duel and literally somehow decreases the attack power of the Blue Eyes White Dragon. And what I found a little weird, maybe it was just me, is I felt like this episode honestly had some somewhat not disturbing but like kind of scary imagery for kids,
Okay.
maybe.
Interesting.
I'm not sure. Like, I don't know. I was easily scared by things as a kid.
Mhm.
And like the first one that I noticed was that the Blue Eyes White Dragon literally just starts like melting,
Mhm.
which I mean, like, isn't that disturbing? Like, I feel like that's something that like a TV exec would look at and be like, oh, that's fine. It's not that weird. It's not like bleeding or anything. But
I always thought it looked yummy,
yummy. That's
like he's a melting ice cream cake.
all right. I mean, that's not the
That's not
impression
my.
I got, but we're here for different perspectives, right?
I did watch it when I was 12. I didn't watch it when I was 7.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, this is an observation I'm making when I'm 20, so not to.
Yes.
So I don't know. I thought it. I don't think that's the as disturbing moment, but I thought it was like a little bit of an interesting thing. But yeah, he hacks into it, and then did you have anything to comment on?
Not quite yet. I guess I'm just waiting till we get to the actual effect this has on the duel. I guess I'm curious to see what else you think. What the other scary imagery were.
Yeah, that's a bit later on.
It's fine. It's what it is. It's just funny that like the computer really determines what is going on in the duel. Like whatever AI or whatever is what computer program is running in the duel arenas is basically what's being told us here is the programming in the duel arenas is really what decides what happens in the duels, and not really like the actual rules of the game.
Yeah, no, I do find that interesting.
It's season 1. There's no rules.
Because everyone recognizes like basically everyone, Pegasus, all the people on the field, Ghost Kaiba, Yugi, they all recognize that this is Seto Kaiba acting as like an outside third party affecting the duel, and they just accept that as like, yep, that anything can happen. Like, isn't there some sort of rule book that says, oh yeah, that's not allowed to happen? Because he is quite literally
Exactly.
hacking the game. I think it's kind of cool that Pegasus just doesn't even care, but it's like, why can't you just be like, oh, he's disqualified?
Well, okay. I mean, you're harping on this, but then what about the actual like the reason the Blue Eyes by Dragon does it get destroyed in this part? I think it gets destroyed, right? The
Yeah, it's
second
like
one
basically
gets
destroyed.
destroyed because Kaiba just yells loud enough.
Mm-hmm. It's the most confusing part of the episode.
I mean,
For some
what did you think of
reason,
that? Is it
I was confused. I think like I somehow accepted it my first viewing, and then when I watched it for the second time, I was like, "What just happened there? Like, did I miss something?"
yeah.
But basically, I do think it's kind of funny because Kaiba yells, he's like Yugi, and then there's a cut to a break here. And it's very noticeable when you don't have any commercials in the way as we're watching it. But when Yugi hears him the first time, when he hears that, he's like, Kaiba? In this like really questioning voice. And then they play the same clip again,
I know.
except it's not the same clip
I
after
know.
the break. And he's like, Kaiba.
I don't know. I've always noticed that. Like, just basically, it's two different line deliveries. It's like one is like
Yeah.
the first one's like shock, and then the second one is like bad line delivery.
There's like,
I don't know why they do it. It drives me crazy too. I mean, I think this is just a sake of like they don't have the same audio files or whatever after they record, but then like just
yeah.
anime in general, when they do flashbacks, they'll re-record the dialogue for the flashback sometimes, and like sometimes it's completely different lines. Not like different like, oh, it changes the context of the scene, but just like they re-record the lines, it's worded a little bit differently. I think they just do that because they don't have the same audio on file, is my guess. But it's like this is the same episode and you just get two different line deliveries, I guess. Maybe just stylistically, it's just supposed to be like, it's a commercial break, so it's like, Kaiba, is this really happening? And then when it comes back, it's like, yes, Kaiba's with me, but the line reading is just really awkward.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I never would have thought of it from that like more technical, like how the lines were recorded and everything.
Well, that doesn't
I
really
kind of
apply here because it's all one episode. But I'm talking about
yeah,
later on, you'll see flashbacks, and you're not going to remember because it's been a while since you've seen
it's
the
been a while.
episode. But like when you've watched it all back to back, like me, you start to realize these line readings sound different than the ones that were in the actual episode that they're flashing back to. So, but in this case, you know what? I'm standing by my arty farty answer, which is just one's supposed to be the tension of a commercial break, and the other one's supposed to be like a yes, Kaiba's standing with me. It's just Dan Green delivered the line very strangely, Kaiba.
So yeah, I was gonna say that was my interpretation. Was like when you're cutting to break, he's supposed to be like confused, like whoa, Kaiba's doing this. But then the tone of like the segment we're about to watch after the commercial break is the Pharaoh being like very aggressive, confident, and so it's kind of immediately starting off with a more like aggressive tone to kind of match that after the commercial break. It's just like when you don't have the commercial break, it sounds weird. It's like those are in no way the same line reading.
Yeah, it is the same shot though. It's not like it's supposed to be a new shot where Yugi's finally like realizing what's going on. They show you the same exact shots
Yeah,
that led up to
exactly.
the commercial break. So,
Um,
no, that's an interesting point for you to bring up. I'm glad you brought that up. I
yeah,
wouldn't have
yeah.
thought to talk about it.
Yeah, the one other thing I wanted to talk about before this, I thought was really funny. I mean, like as someone who does programming, I don't really care, but I just love how they're visualizing Pegasus hacking into Kaiba. So basically, Seto Kaiba hacks in to lower the attack of the Blue Eyes White Dragon, but then he gets cut off by Pegasus before he can fully weaken the dragon. And it's just this really weird, almost Roger Rabbit looking bunny that's just saying Kaiba over and over.
No,
I think
hey
it's just like the
Kaiba,
most
hey
yeah,
Kaiba,
hey
hey
Kaiba, hey
Kaiba.
Kaiba. It's just like so stupid, but I kind of love it. I don't really have much to say. It's just really funny to me.
It's supposed to be the same rabbit. He's reading a comic book earlier, remember?
Oh,
Gorgonzola
oh,
cheese and the world's finest fruit juice. He's and the best comic book in the world, or whatever he says. It's the same comic book character as that, so that's what it's supposed to be connected to. It's not completely random and out of nowhere.
that's kind of hilarious. I mean, like I never would have recognized that on my first viewing, at least.
If we were watching these closer together, this is the longest we've gone from like recording
True.
and watching episodes, I think. So I think that probably you saw it in the first Mokuba episode.
Yeah, he's reading the comic
So
book when he's eating his food or
yeah,
whatever. Yeah. But anyways, I do think that that's actually more interesting than I thought because that applies, I mean, like a vague amount of depth to Pegasus's character. Like he's still
Yeah,
he's
I mean,
just like he's not a human. He's a villain. But like he is
he's
just a
human.
guy
What do you
who
mean?
he's I don't know what I meant with that, but I'm gonna stick
You
with
can say he's not a
it.
human.
I don't know what it meant. Don't look into it. Don't read into it. Pegasus is basically just like another human in that anyone else in that he has taste in entertainment and he likes to apply that to other things like with hacking. Like he's like, oh, I like this cartoon character. I'm gonna use it when I'm hacking Seto Kaiba for some reason. So it just kind of humanizes him. I guess where we are here is Yugi and Mokuba realize that this is like for sure that this is an imposter. They know that Seto Kaiba is alive because he heard him telepathically, of course, naturally. But so because of that, they kind of pressure Ghost Kaiba, like, hey, like you're not actually Kaiba. And this is the moment where I personally thought was not like that disturbing imagery, but like it's a bit weird when he's transforming into the dark Kaiba. He literally like his skin starts becoming really bloated, and it's kind of disturbing. Like with his face, it's quickly like cleared up. The way he looks is like a clown, so it's kind of comic imagery. So it's not really anything that lasts for too long, and I'm sure like you'd kind of would linger on it. But when you're actually looking at some of those frames, you're like, that's kind of disturbing.
Yeah, it never bothered me as a kid. I remember stuff like that did bother me at that age.
Hmm.
I don't know if it's body horror, but just like when something is inside your body and you like trying to push its way out of you. That
Yeah.
might say a lot about me. The ending of The Matrix or something like that, where Neo
Hmm.
jumps into Smith's body and stuff, and just like you can see like his fingers running up his skin or something like that. It's just like, oh my god, from
Spoiler
inside his
warning.
skin. It's really disgusting. Yeah, spoiler warning for The Matrix.
Put that in the
Um,
description.
so wait, before we move on, we got to talk about what happens in the manga instead of the anime version of this, which
Okay.
is Kaiba just wakes out of his coma.
What?
Kaiba wakes up from his coma. We've talked about the Kaiba coma thing, right?
Yeah, yeah. How does
Instead
that
of
work?
Kaiba doing any hacking to weaken his blue eyes, but I don't even think the gradually weakening attack points happen like it
Mhm.
did here. It's just Kaiba finally comes out of his coma, stands up, and then the blue eyes just dies.
Okay.
That's how the manga handles it.
That's weird.
It's supposed to be like Yugi's passion for the duel or something like that, or passion for Kaiba as his rival, like wakes him up. But yeah, it's very silly. And then I guess
Um,
what's funny about that is after that, the ventriloquist guy from the manga who's dueling Yugi instead of Kaiba drops
mhm.
the puppet,
Hmm.
and then he's just dueling the ventriloquist
He's
guy.
just
So
doing as a normal guy.
it's a similar thing there where now Yugi's dueling like a different looking person as opposed to just dueling a doll of Kaiba. It's all very strange. I guess I prefer the anime version of it, but you don't get much stranger than the manga. So
I think this works better. I don't know if we've explicitly mentioned it or not, but this version of Kaiba is the dark part of Kaiba that
Mhm.
Yugi sent to the dark realm or whatever in their initial duel. So like when he won, he split Kaiba's mind or whatever, and this was like the dark parts of Kaiba that Pegasus somehow saved and returned to this world, which is interesting.
Yeah, I think visually the anime just makes it a lot more coherent. Where here it's almost like this ventriloquist shows up with a doll of Kaiba, or a dummy of Kaiba, and then he's just like,
Yeah.
"Oh no, Kaiba's really the doll. I'm just helping him speak." And then he drops it. Eventually, he's like, "I'm just nope, just kidding. It was me."
Yeah,
Really, the ventriloquist was controlling the doll. Really?
it seems really silly to me, like the manga version compared to the anime. The anime, like, it's clear it's an imposter, but you don't know who it is, and then it's like, oh, it's the guy who was in, or the
Yeah.
dark parts of Kaiba in the Shadow Realm, which is still silly, like
It's all
reading his
silly, but
mind,
like
whatever.
visually, the anime one makes more sense to me. Where the manga, it almost seems like a joke. Like you can't have the twist be a ventriloquist was controlling the dummy the whole time.
Exactly. Like, how would they ever believe that?
A ventriloquist that you've seen the whole time. It's not like he was hiding or something, and then all of a sudden
Yeah.
he pops out from behind a curtain. He's just there, sitting there the whole time, going like, "Oh, I'm not really doing anything."
Yeah. No, it doesn't make any sense. I like the way this looks because the Ghost Kaiba just looks like Seto Kaiba with like a little bit of makeup on, so it could be Kaiba. Anyways, I kind of like this part of the episode. It feels, and correct me if I'm wrong, I have never played a single actual game of Yu-Gi-Oh, but it feels like there's some sort of like strategy going on here more so than in other parts. Because a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh, and I'm okay with it, but a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh is like kind of half playing, half talking at each other, and this feels very much like it's actually just like getting into the nitty gritty of playing and actually just trying trying to like beat the opponent rather than trying to intimidate them, because it really just focuses on going on. So like when Ghost Kaiba is basically just stalling, he's playing monsters and playing them all in defense mode until he gets his last blue eyes, which only had to draw 3 cards for. I kept thinking like they all get so lucky, like they all get the cards exactly when they need it. He gets all his blue eyes super early in his deck. Yugi in his first duel got Exodia super fast, which seems pretty rare. I don't know. It just seems like they, but I've never played a game, so I don't know.
I mean, usually you build your deck around being able to draw what you want when you want, kind of stuff, like more search
Okay.
abilities and stuff like that. So that's like an actual Yu-Gi-Oh match. Where here they're literally just pulling out whatever's on top. Like actual Yu-Gi-Oh deck, you don't want to have your strategy rely on the first 5 cards you draw and then each one you draw for each turn. You want to have cards that like help you go through your deck faster.
Yeah, and kind of continuing off of a point I said earlier with playing more trap cards or spells and stuff, you see this a lot more. Yugi decides to place a card face down, and then Ghost Kaiba does the exact same thing. So it's like, why wouldn't you do that more? Because if you're showing your hand, then your opponent knows exactly what they're up against. If you're putting things face down, then they have to prepare against a lot more things. I don't understand why you wouldn't be doing this more. But again, I've never played Yu-Gi-Oh. But yeah, I do like how this goes, because one of the cards that Yugi had face down was a reflecting attack, and then Ghost Kaiba also plays like a nullification attack, because it makes sense. They set it up with playing the
Mhm.
cards down. It's not like, oh, I had this card in my hand that activates whenever. It's like, no, he put it face down. And then I think the final end of the duel, just skip 2, is pretty satisfying as well, where seemingly, like, in my opinion, very overpowered card from what it seems, where Yugi is able to take any monster in either of the discard piles and revive it. So of course he chooses the Blue Eyes White Dragon. It feels a little bit overpowered, but maybe I don't think it's too overpowered. It's just like in this circumstance, it's very helpful.
It jumped off and back on the ban list for years when I was
Hmm.
playing. Like it was like every other season. Not that's not true, but like maybe every other year it was back in the game. Every other year it was back off the game. Yeah, back on the ban list. I think now it's back just because there's like too many other more broken cards you could use. So like nobody's really worried about Monster Reborn anymore.
But what I did think was funny with that is when he uses that card, Ghost Kaiba like very clearly explains it for the audience, like, oh no, this card lets you
Yes.
go into either your discard pile or your opponent's discard pile and revive any monster and put it in your hand. And then Yugi or the Pharaoh is just like, I'm glad you know the rules, Ghost Kaiba. I just thought it was like so tongue in cheek. I'm sure you noticed it too. Yeah. So the end of the duel is basically just Yugi used a card I believe called the Mystical Elf, and then he uses that to greatly improve the attack power of the Blue Eyes White Dragon to 4100, which seems pretty strong to me. But in this case, it's definitely enough to destroy Ghost Kaiba. And then I do find it funny where we're starting to see some like huge overkills, I want to say, like with Pharaoh. Pharaoh's
Yes.
really showing his power in this case to the point where it really like it doesn't feel like Yugi, it feels like the Pharaoh. So basically what happens is he wins the duel, and then after doing that, he activates his shadow powers, and he's like, your Pharaoh may have helped you escape the Shadow Realm once, but you're going back there for good now. So he sends him back to the Shadow Realm, and then he's flying in the air, floating, looking really majestic and like intimidating.
Yugi is?
The Pharaoh, yeah, in my
I never
opinion.
let me look at that visual again because that's never how I never interpreted him as him flying. I thought he was just kind of standing there, but like all this light is shooting out now. So
Yeah, I don't think maybe he isn't flying, but
no,
like
he's not.
his
He's not
hair
flying,
is
Josh. It's just the
blowing.
camera's panning up, so it looks like he's
Okay,
kind of
okay.
floating or something.
Still, I mean, like, if you just look at the shot, like, he's speaking directly to Pegasus. He literally, like, breaks the wine glass that Pegasus is holding, and they're basically just talking trash to each other. But it's like, for an anime stupid card game, it's getting really intense. But I mean, that's what it's for the over.
Oh, Josh, if you think this is intense, just wait.
I'm not saying it's intense. I'm more just kind of pointing it out now, so we're slowly seeing how it's going to progress, because I'm sure it's going to get crazy.
Yeah, I think this ending is just supposed to be like showing Yugi and the Pharaoh like coming into the power of the Millennium Puzzle and stuff like that, learning to control it or at least learning to use it. So that's what's like
Yeah.
all this like power light, as I'll call it, is supposed to signify.
I know for
Uh,
sure, because I mean, Pegasus very specifically like points that out. He's like, "You've learned a lot about just shadow powers since we last dueled Yugi, but when we duel next, I'll still win." Basically, I like the setup. I feel like there's a lot of good setup between like Yugi and Pegasus going on continually, even though they like never directly interact. I guess besides telepathically. Like it would have been kind of easy for them to have the season 1 episode 2 be the like only interaction between them, and that would have been enough of a grudge that like when we see him later when they duel, presumably, I don't know for sure, it would have been enough to know like the emotional weight behind it. But I feel like there's a very strong we understand Pegasus as a villain, what he's doing, and he still feels like a very active member of it. So hopefully when we do have that duel between them, it'll be reasonably satisfying.
All right, Josh. So to wrap up, would you recommend this episode and the whole Ghost Kaiba trilogy of episodes, the last 3 episodes?
Yeah, I forgot it was a trilogy. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely very important because I believe this is where we got reintroduced to Seto Kaiba all the way at the back. So getting all the character with him is important. I wouldn't say this episode blew me away, but it also in no ways was bad. I think it was just like honestly a pretty standard episode of the show, which I would say is pretty good. Like I feel like their general level of quality is very high. So while we're in episode 10, so we're getting kind of used to it at this point. Yes, I recommend it, and it's a pretty good level of quality that I don't want to like just dismiss.
I feel a little ambivalent towards this episode. I think I said this in one of the earlier episodes of this trilogy, just that this should have probably just been 2 episodes. Like the first one, maybe the first half is dueling Mokuba, and then the second half of that episode is either the start of this duel, and then the next episode could just be all this duel. I feel like while this duel is pretty simple overall, it did need more time to set up the real Kaiba, like hacking into the computer and stuff like that. But I still feel like this all could have been done in 2 episodes, and I feel like that's weird for me to just be like, oh well, it should have been 2 episodes as opposed to 3. Like that's my main complaint. But it really did like feel its length, and there was like lots of just like it felt like there was lots of filler going on. We didn't really talk about that in the episode, but there was lots of cutting back to Joey, Taya, and Tristan just kind of saying things on the sideline. And I know that's kind of their function, and like I don't want to like dismiss them as like, oh, they're like the pointless friend characters, so therefore I don't like them. It's not even that, because most of them I've enjoyed their presence, I've enjoyed their cheerleading, but in this episode it really felt like every time we cut back to them, it's like we're trying to fill this out to 3 episodes, and I'm like, then just make 2, because in the manga this is like 2 chapters, and the chapters are already half the length of an episode.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it could have been done in 2. It may have been like a little rushed. I think the problem is like it would have been on the edge either way. And with 3 episodes, it feels a little overly extended. With 2 episodes, it may have felt a little rushed. I'm not sure which is better, but I definitely agree with what you're saying.
This definitely feels like it has a trilogy problem where the third one's the worst, and I think some of that just comes from the fact that you're just kind of done with it at this point. I'm not saying I'm done with the show at all. I'm just saying like I'm ready to move on to something else. I'm really excited about the next 2 episodes we have coming up. We have our first guest coming up pretty soon after the next 2 episodes. Episode 13, we'll have our first guest on the show, and that's really exciting. Yeah, of course, watch it. It progresses the story. The critical side of my brain just says this could have been 2 really great episodes, but instead it's kind of a chore to go back and watch all 3 just in terms of how padded out. But man, if I'm already complaining about padding out, might want to throw in the towel right now. But we're still good, still having a good time. And it's just weird that I feel this way because it feels like several iconic things happen of like Yugi fighting, Blue Eyes by Dragon Kaiba's deck and stuff like that. The way he defeats the deck in this episode, I feel like is somewhat iconic to the series. The Ghost Kaiba thing is definitely a memorable part of the show. But yeah, I'm feeling a little cold towards the episode, but I think that just more has to do with how long it goes on as opposed to like the overall quality of the story and the story being told and stuff like that. Definitely some improvements though over the manga. I definitely think the way that the Ghost Kaiba is executed in this anime is stronger than it is in the manga, where it just kind of, again, I don't want to use the word silly because it's all silly, but it's confusing in the manga, and here it's like, okay, I get it. I understand what this Ghost Kaiba thing is, and I get what the threat is.
Yeah.
So, good episode. I'm happy that we're moving on to something else, though. Next episode is definitely focused on different characters.
No spoiler.
Oh my god.
All right. Well, yeah. Thank you everyone for listening. Yeah.
Watch Yu-Gi-Oh.
Watch
Stay home
Yu-Gi-Oh.
and watch
And
Yu-Gi-Oh.
thank you for listening to our Yu-Gi-Oh podcast. We'll see you next time.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a manga series originally created by manga artist and author Kazuki Takahashi, and originally published in Shonen Jump Magazine. The Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime was created by Gallop Company Limited, and the English dub primarily discussed in this podcast was produced by 4Kids Entertainment. This podcast is a non-profit media content, and created for entertainment purposes only. All rights of content discussed and music used go to their respective owners. We hope you'll join us next time.